Every town has a history. Some have scandals. Some have unsolved mysteries. But Ridgewood had something different. It had a tragedy born from within its own police department. A tragedy that no one saw coming until it was already too late. This is the story of Daniel Riker, former officer, former soldier, and eventually, one of the most dangerous fugitives in state history. The man who went from decorated law enforcement hero to double homicide killer. The question isn't just what he did. It's how he became who he became. And why. Daniel Riker joined the Ridgewood Police Department in 2012, at the age of 23. He had the kind of resume departments compete for 4 years in the U.S. Army. Clean record, high physical performance, top scores in tactical training, strong marks in communication, and a solid understanding of behavioral psychology. He wasn't just good. He was exceptional. His police academy instructors described him as focused, disciplined, effortlessly calm under pressure. Within his first year on the force, Daniel received 3 commendations. For quick response during a school lockdown incident. For helping rescue a child trapped inside a burning car. For de-escalating a violent confrontation between 2 armed suspects. To the community, Daniel was a hero. To his colleagues, he was reliable. To supervisors, he was the kind of officer you could build a department around. But brilliance often casts a shadow. There were things about Daniel, small things that people brushed off at the time. They shouldn't have. At Ridgewood PD, Daniel was known for being polite, respectful, and astonishingly professional. But there were moments, fleeting glimpses of something darker. An officer once overheard him yelling on the phone outside the station. Daniel slammed the phone against the wall hard enough to crack it. When questioned, he brushed it off as just stress. A training partner reported that during hand-to-hand sessions, Daniel occasionally applied holds with more force than needed, even after the instructor called, "Stop." A dispatcher noted that Daniel sometimes arrived at scenes already amped up, breathing too heavily for someone supposedly calm. These weren't red flags. Not at the time. Police work attracts intense personalities. Stress comes with the job. But years later, after the homicides, investigators would revisit these early signs and ask, how did we not see it? Daniel wasn't a social person. He wasn't unfriendly. He simply kept to himself. Many officers thought that was part of his discipline. Go to work, go home, train, repeat. But isolation is a dangerous companion for a mind under pressure. Friends from the Army said Daniel had always been stern, even rigid. But after transitioning to police work, something changed. He became quieter, less emotionally expressive, more mechanical. It didn't seem concerning at the time, but it would soon become a defining element of his collapse. February 13, 2021. A date that would reshape the rest of Daniel's life. It started as a routine call the type officers receive weekly. Category: domestic disturbance. Address: 14 Willow Creek Lane. Reports: neighbors heard a couple arguing loudly. Daniel arrived with Officer James Fletcher, a younger officer he helped train. Within 90 seconds of arrival, gunfire erupted. When backup arrived, the suspect, a 34-year-old man named Matthew Klein, was dead from a close-range gunshot. Daniel claimed Klein reached for a weapon during the argument. No weapon was found. Neighbors reported hearing Daniel shout first. One said she heard, "Don't move. Don't you F***Angie move, asterisk," followed by a single gunshot. Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. The review lasted months. It gnawed at Daniel. He believed the department should have backed him instantly, because in his mind he made the right call, the call any tough officer would make. But the department needed proof. Procedure mattered. Perception mattered. Daniel didn't care. He saw the investigation as a betrayal. Colleagues later noticed. He became more irritable. He avoided jokes or small talk. He stopped going to the gym with partners. He worked overtime excessively. He spoke obsessively about how the system failed good cops. He took everything personally. When the department ultimately cleared him due to lack of evidence, Daniel didn't feel relieved. He felt marked, stained, targeted. Officer Fletcher, the same young officer who was present during the incident, told a friend, "Daniels isn't the same. It's like something in him broke that night." He was right. Daniel's girlfriend of 4 years left him just months after the investigation ended. She later told detectives, "He wasn't the man I met. He was angry at everything. He didn't sleep. He stared at the walls for hours. He started talking like the department was trying to ruin him." Daniel's finances also deteriorated. He had $16,000 in credit card debt, personal loan he defaulted on, a failed attempt to start a tactical gearside business, a growing drinking habit that cost more than he realized. The department noticed inconsistencies: tardiness, insubordination, missing paperwork. Supervisors gave warnings. Daniel took them as insults. He became obsessed with the idea that people were turning against him, and slowly he built a mental list of everyone he felt betrayed him. 2 names were always at the top: Detective Laura Bennett, the lead investigator who questioned his actions during the Klein shooting; Officer James Fletcher, the young officer who testified he didn't see the suspect reach for a weapon. Years later, those names would become the victims. Daniel spent hours on obscure forums dedicated to disgraced police officers, failures of internal affairs, corruption in departments nationwide, anti-investigation groups, paramilitary survivalist communities. In one forum post, recovered after his death, he wrote, "People think cops break bad overnight. No, the real story is how the system crushes you slowly until something inside finally snaps." This was 6 months before the murders. No one saw it. No one helped him. No one intervened. And Daniel continued to spiral. March 3, 2023. A day Ridgewood will never forget. Detective Laura Bennett and Officer James Fletcher were found dead behind an abandoned industrial building at the edge of town. Both shot at close range. Both still wearing their badges. Both with their service weapons still holstered. The scene screamed execution. Investigators found boot prints matching the exact style Daniel always wore. Shell casings from a 9mm, the same caliber as Daniel's personal gun. A torn jacket fragment matching one he was seen wearing earlier that week. Surveillance footage of a truck nearly identical to his near the scene. When investigators went to Daniel's home, he was gone. His car was gone. His phone was gone. His personal firearm was gone. And on the kitchen table was a single note: "If no one will hear me when I speak, they will hear me when I am gone." Daniel Riker had vanished. The disappearance of a highly trained former officer triggered an immediate multi-agency response. Local police, state police, U.S. Marshals, eventually the FBI. They all agreed on one thing: Daniel Riker was now one of the most dangerous men in the state. He knew police tactics, evasion strategies, survival methods, how to avoid cameras, how to follow or break patterns, how to disappear. And for the first 72 hours, he left nothing behind. No digital trail, no credit card use, no sightings, no confirmed movements. A ghost. When a civilian disappears, the search begins with hope. When a dangerous criminal disappears, the search begins with strategy. But when a highly trained former police officer, armed, angry, and unstable, vanishes into the woods, the search begins with fear. For the next 16 days, Daniel Riker would evade some of the most experienced trackers, officers, and agents in the region. Not because he was lucky, but because he knew exactly how they operated. He knew how they searched, how they predicted, how they followed. And he knew, because he used to be one of them. For 3 days after the murders, Daniel simply disappeared. No one knew if he was alive or dead, if he had fled the state, or was hiding nearby. But on the morning of March 6th, a gas station camera near County Line Road captured a brief, grainy image of a man matching Daniel's build. He was unshaven, wearing a hooded jacket, clothes soaked with mud, carrying a small backpack. keeping his head down, buying only water and energy bars. The footage lasted only 9 seconds. But those 9 seconds triggered one of the largest manhunts the state had ever seen. Investigators later concluded that Daniel was attempting to follow a cold trail pattern, moving unpredictably, heading toward remote areas, using back roads, avoiding major intersections. But he underestimated the gas station's new security cameras. Once authorities confirmed it was Daniel, dozens of agencies mobilized. Helicopters swept the region. Drones scanned thermal signatures. Roadblocks were set up. But Daniel was already miles away. On the second day of the manhunt, detectives executed a full search warrant on Daniel's home. Inside his bedroom closet was a hidden compartment. Inside that compartment were military-grade maps with marked forest routes, a go-bag packed with freeze-dried meals, survival manuals, a burner phone, a list of abandoned structures around Ridgewood, a single-page letter titled, "If you're reading this, I've already been betrayed." Investigators realized something chilling. Daniel had planned an escape long before the murders. He had prepared for a scenario where he would need to disappear quickly, efficiently, and silently. They also found 3 handwritten journals full of rants about corruption, beliefs that the department wanted him gone, fear that internal affairs was targeting him, paranoia about coworkers spying on him, obsessive references to betrayal. A psychiatrist later said, "The journals showed a mind spiraling into delusion. He believed the world was closing in on him." But Daniel wasn't delusional in a disorganized way. He was delusional and strategic, a dangerous combination. As word spread that the double homicide suspect was a trained ex-officer with military survival knowledge, fear swept through Ridgewood. Residents locked doors and windows. Neighborhood groups formed watch patrols. Shops closed early. Parents kept kids home from extracurricular activities. One resident said, "You grow up trusting police officers. You don't ever imagine one of them turning into the killer you're running from." Schools ran modified lockdown drills. The town's mayor urged calm, but panic was already planted. News outlets ran hourly updates. Social media erupted with speculation. Anonymous tips poured in, most of them false. Everyone was looking for Daniel. Everyone was afraid of him. On March 10th, 4 days after the gas station sighting, a hiker reported hearing someone shouting in frustration deep inside Pine Hollow Nature Reserve. Search teams rushed in. K9 units found a scent trail. Thermal drones detected a faint heat signature near a creek. Officers converged from 3 directions. For a moment, it seemed inevitable. Daniel was cornered. But Daniel knew Pine Hollow. He had camped there as a child. He had patrolled its edges as an officer. He had mapped its terrain in his go-bag. When officers approached, Daniel slipped into a shallow stream, walked through it for nearly a mile to destroy his scent, then submerged himself beneath a fallen tree, leaving only his lips above water for air. Thermal drones scanned right over him. K9 units lost the trail. He escaped again. An officer later said, "We weren't dealing with a fugitive. We were dealing with a survival expert." Contrary to Hollywood portrayals, fugitives don't live glamorous lives. Daniel's reality over those 16 days was brutal. No fires, flames produce smoke. No shelters, too traceable. No hot meals, too time-consuming. Limited sleep, never more than 45 minutes at a time. Constant movement, never stay in one area more than a few hours. Hunger, enough to make him dizzy. Dehydration, his water rations ran out quickly. Injuries, cuts, infected blisters, a sprained wrist. Temperature, near-freezing nights. Paranoia. Every twig snap. Every animal rustle. Every distant voice. Daniel had survival training, but survival mentality is different from survival reality. His journals from the go-bag, written in short bursts, revealed his decline. "Can't sleep. They're everywhere. Fletcher lied. Bennett lied. I did everything right. They're trying to pin everything on me. I'm not the villain. They are. My head hurts. Can't think straight. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." These were the writings of a man deteriorating. Yet he remained dangerous. On March 12th, a farmer reported seeing a man cross his field at 3 a.m. The man moved slowly, limping, carried a backpack, looked exhausted, disappeared into the tree line. By the time police arrived, Daniel was already gone. The next day, a silver sedan was reported stolen 2 towns over. It was found 19 hours later, engine still warm, abandoned near the state border. Inside, investigators found mud-caked footprints, a torn seatbelt, a single granola bar wrapper, a hand-sketched map of backroads. Every sign pointed to Daniel. He wasn't fleeing randomly. He was trying to reach a specific region. But which one? On March 14th, 11 days after the murders, a trucker pulled into an interstate rest stop. Behind the dumpster, he saw a man sleeping in a fetal position, wrapped in a jacket that looked like it had been torn to shreds. The trucker didn't get close. He simply reported a suspicious person. Deputies arrived quietly. When they approached, the man bolted into the brush at a speed that surprised everyone. They chased him but lost him. However, this time Daniel left something behind. His backpack. Inside they found a half-eaten protein bar, a blood-stained wrap for his wrist, a burner phone with no SEMA small flashlight, a map with 2 circles drawn around Pine Hollow Reserve, a folded note addressed to his sister. The note read, "I didn't want it to end like this, but I can't let them take me. They ruined my life. I'm sorry." This was the first sign of remorse. It was also the first sign his mental stability was cracking. The discovery of the backpack changed everything. Investigators realized 2 critical things. Daniel was physically deteriorating. He was circling back toward Ridgewood, not escaping from it. Authorities launched full tactical operations around Pine Hollow. Drones in 24-hour cycles. Motion sensors placed along trails. Mounted units sweeping ridge lines. Patrols at every trailhead. Plainclothes officers posing as hikers. Heat detection equipment positioned along creeks. Still, Daniel evaded all of them. A U.S. Marshal later remarked, "It was like hunting a ghost who knew the rules of the hunt better than the hunters." By March 16th, Daniel had been on the run for 13 days. He was starving, sleep-deprived, injured, disoriented, mentally fractured. His ability to think tactically began slipping. He made mistakes, leaving tracks in soft mud, taking short, more predictable routes, resting too close to trails, leaving behind an improvised water filter, forgetting to bury food wrappers. Investigators could tell he was declining. One detective said, "He was no longer a tactical fugitive. He was a desperate man trying to survive another day." But even a desperate man can be dangerous. On March 17th, a drone spotted movement near an abandoned ranger station deep in Pine Hollow. At first, investigators thought it was an animal. But when the figure stumbled into view, leaning against a wall for support, carrying no backpack, they knew it was Daniel. He was weak, malnourished, barely able to walk, but still armed. A decision was made. Move in fast, surround the ranger station, and end the manhunt. What happened next would become one of the most intense standoffs in the town's history. It would also become the final chapter of Daniel's descent. For 16 days, Daniel Riker had been a ghost, drifting in and out of the woods, leaving behind only fragments of his desperation. But on the morning of March 17th, the ghost finally left a footprint. And for the first time, the hunters could see him. The drone footage, shaky but unmistakable, showed a man barely recognizable from the officer he once was. Gaunt face, sunken eyes, torn jacket, limping gait, dirt smeared through his hair, a pistol still tucked at his hip. The manhunt had gone from tactical pursuit to a race against time. Would they reach him before he hurt someone or himself? When the drone operator radioed the confirmation, visual on suspect. He's at the old ranger station. He's alone. Units mobilized instantly. Sheriff Hayward's voice cut through the comms. All teams move. quiet and controlled. No one takes an unnecessary shot. He's cornered, but he's a trained shooter. Within minutes, a perimeter was forming. SWAT moved in from the West Ridge. State police from the East Trail. Deputies from the Creekside Access. U.S. Marshals positioned along the southern slope. But it wasn't enough to surround Daniel. Not yet. The building sat in a clearing, a half-collapsed wooden structure with a single entrance and boarded windows. Perfect for a fugitive who needed cover. Perfect for a man whose mind was slipping. Inside the station, investigators later pieced together what Daniel did when he first entered. He barricaded the door with a broken table, ripped cloth from his jacket to bind his wrist, scavenged for food, finding none, drank stagnant water from a plastic container, positioned himself behind a rotted support beam, waited. He must have known he was surrounded. Or maybe he didn't care anymore. At 9:42 a.m., a negotiator made the first call out. Negotiator. Daniel. This is Deputy Tyler with Crisis Negotiations. We're here to help. You're not in danger if you come out with your hands visible. A long silence followed. Then, a voice, hoarse, barely audible. Daniel, from inside. You're lying. You've always lied. The negotiator continued. Negotiator. No one is here to hurt you. We just want to make sure you're safe. Daniel's reply was chilling. Daniel. Safe? Safe ended for me a long time ago. To understand why Daniel sounded like a man abandoned by the world, investigators revisited a moment from his past. 3 years earlier, Daniel and his partner had pulled over a vehicle suspected in a series of burglaries. A 17-year-old boy was inside, panicked, scared, holding a stolen handgun. Shots were fired. Chaos erupted. The teen was killed. Daniel claimed self-defense. Internal Affairs launched a full investigation. The department found the shooting justified, but not before the story hit the newspapers. Not before activists protested outside the station. Not before Daniel was suspended, questioned, and treated like a criminal. A coworker later said, after that shooting, he was never the same. He withdrew. He looked over his shoulder constantly. He stopped trusting everyone. It was the moment his mental unraveling began. Now, trapped inside a rotting ranger station, those old wounds were fuel for his paranoia. Back in Pine Hollow, tensions were rising. Hours passed. No progress. 10:35 a.m. Daniel fires the first shot. Without warning, a single gunshot blasted through a wooden board on the window frame. Officers ducked. Adrenaline spiked. Radio chatter exploded. But the shot wasn't aimed at anyone. It was a warning. Daniel shouting, "Stay back. I'm not going in alive." His voice cracked, thick with exhaustion and rage. Negotiators shifted tactics, bringing in the familiar face. Sheriff Hayward made a controversial call. Bring in Captain Fletcher. Fletcher had been Daniel's longtime supervisor. The man Daniel once trusted and later accused of betrayal. When Fletcher arrived, he took the megaphone. Fletcher. Danny, it's me. Silence. Then, Daniel. You finally showed your face. Fletcher kept his voice calm. Fletcher. Daniel. No one here wants to see you hurt. Let's talk. Just talk. Daniel's answer came in fragmented sentences. Daniel. You abandoned me. You let them investigate me. You left me bleeding alone in that room. Fletcher dropped his head. Everyone could see the guilt on his face. Fletcher. I didn't abandon you, son. I followed protocol. You know that. Daniel's reply was rage-filled. Daniel. Protocol is what destroyed my life. Psychologists watching the live feed recognized the pattern. Daniel was spiraling into hypervigilant paranoia, persecution delusions, identity collapse, trauma reactivation. One said, he's not fighting the officers. He's fighting the ghosts of the past. And those ghosts were armed with every mistake Daniel ever made. By mid-afternoon, Daniel had refused food and water, threatened self-harm, fired warning shots, barricaded deeper, ignored negotiation attempts. The U.S. Marshals on scene prepared for a forced entry. Sheriff Hayward, torn, argued, "He's one of ours. I don't want him dying like this." But the commander's reply was firm. "He's armed. He's unstable. We can't wait forever." They gave Daniel one last warning. "Commander," on loudspeaker, "Daniel Riker, this is your final opportunity to surrender peacefully." A pause. "Daniel, I can't." Another pause. Then almost a whisper. "Daniel, they took everything from me." At 3:28 p.m., smoke canisters were launched to disorient and flush Daniel. The wooden structure filled with white vapor. Radio call. "Entry team, go." SWAT closed in. Ram to the door. Shields up. Laser sights scanning. Voices yelling commands. Inside, Daniel stumbled backward, coughing, disoriented. He raised his pistol, then stopped. Something shifted in him. Something broke. Instead of firing, Daniel collapsed against the wall. When officers breached, they found him on his knees, gun trembling in his hand, tears streaming down his dirt-covered face. "Officer, Daniel, drop the weapon." Daniel looked at the ceiling as if speaking to someone no one else could see. "Daniel, I didn't want to become this." Then he placed the gun on the floor, hands raised, finally surrendering. The officers rushed in, secured him, and carried him out. The standoff was over, but the story was not. After 16 days of running, starving, hallucinating, and fighting shadows, Daniel was medically stabilized and then taken into custody. For the first time in 2 weeks, he sat in a real room, for walls, table, 2 chairs, and a camera watching silently. Detective Bennett entered, the same Bennett Daniel accused of betraying him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Bennett pressed the record button. "Bennett, Daniel, I want to know why." Daniel stared at his cuffed hands. His reply was so soft the microphone barely caught it. "Daniel, they poisoned everything." "Bennett, who?" Daniel lifted his eyes, red and hollow. "Daniel, you did." What Daniel told investigators over the next hours would reshape the case. He spoke of threats he believed the department made, an internal affairs plot, voices telling him people were conspiring, feeling watched at home, losing his grip on reality. Psychologists reviewing the footage suspected severe trauma, untreated PTSD, depressive breakdown, paranoia, possible psychosis. But motive alone wasn't enough. They needed the truth behind the murders. And in Part 4, Daniel finally reveals it, piece by piece. For 16 days, he ran. For 16 days, he starved, hid, and spiraled into madness. But now, for the first time, Daniel Riker could no longer run. From the law, from his past, or from himself. And in the hours that followed his capture, a truth emerged that shocked investigators, the community, and even those who once called him a friend. This was the confession. After the medical stabilization, after the restraints were loosened, after the adrenaline washed away, Daniel sat silently across from Detective Bennett. Bennett, calm, steady, but visibly strained, repeated the question. "Bennett, Daniel, why did you kill them?" For almost a full minute, Daniel didn't respond. He stared at the table, at his hands, at the scratches across his knuckles, at the dried blood under his nails. Finally, he exhaled a long, trembling breath. "Daniel, I didn't plan it. I didn't go there to kill anyone." Bennett leaned forward. "Bennett, then tell me what happened." Daniel's eyes drifted toward the camera in the corner of the room. For a moment, he looked like he was unsure if it was even real. On the night of February 29th, Daniel's entire world collapsed. He claimed he had been followed that day. He believed someone from Internal Affairs trailed him. He reported seeing the same car twice near his home. He wrote in his journal, "They're coming. I feel it." Investigators later determined the car belonged to a food delivery driver. Nothing more. But in Daniel's deteriorating mind, it was confirmation of a conspiracy. That night, he drove to the home of Officer Mark Fletcher's niece, a woman named Emily, who Daniel believed had information related to the investigation he was convinced existed. Emily lived with her fiancé, Ryan Kessler. Daniel insisted he went there because, Daniel, she knew something. She sent me a message. Or I thought she did. No such message was ever found. According to Daniel, he knocked on the door. He expected Emily to be alone. But Ryan opened it. Daniel said the man looked surprised, confused, tense. Detective Bennett pressed. Bennett, tense? Or scared because an armed ex-cop showed up at his door at night? Daniel swallowed hard. Daniel, I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed answers. He claimed he tried to explain. Tried to ask about the supposed message. Ryan allegedly stepped back, raising his hands, insisting they didn't know what Daniel was talking about. But Daniel wasn't hearing reason. He believed they were lying. He believed they were stalling. He believed they were part of something bigger. And when Ryan tried to shut the door, Daniel forced it open. The first homicide began not as a planned attack, but as a chaotic, panic struggle driven by paranoia. Ryan's death. Daniel described the moment with a trembling voice. Daniel, he grabbed my arm, or maybe I grabbed his. It happened too fast. I didn't even remember pulling the gun until it went off. The bullet hit Ryan in the chest. He died within moments. But what Daniel said next chilled the investigators. Daniel, when he fell, I saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't the enemy. He wasn't part of anything. He was just a guy trying to protect his home. For the first time in the interrogation, Daniel broke down. Tears streamed down his face. His body shook. He whispered, Daniel, I killed an innocent man. But the horror didn't end there. Emily, panicked and screaming, ran toward the hallway. Daniel followed. Daniel insisted he didn't intend to kill her. He said he wanted to explain, to tell her the truth, to make her understand the danger. But Emily wasn't listening. She was terrified, screaming for help. Daniel's voice cracked as he recounted the moment. Daniel, I grabbed her arm. She fought. She hit me. She tried to run. I told her I just needed to talk. Investigators found bruising on Emily's wrist consistent with being pulled. Daniel, panicking, desperate to silence her screams, covered her mouth. She bit his hand, drawing blood. Daniel, I just pushed her back. I didn't mean. She hit her head on the edge of the counter. Then she wasn't moving. He claimed she didn't die instantly. Medical examiners later confirmed she survived the first blow. Daniel, realizing she was still alive, said he panicked. Daniel, I thought, if she wakes up, she'll tell them everything. They'll twist it. I'll lose everything. That moment, that belief, was the final break in Daniel's sanity. He suffocated her with a pillow, not out of rage, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. And that made it even more terrifying. Daniel's state of mind. After the two killings, Daniel claimed he felt numb, cold, and outside of his own body. He said, Daniel, it felt like watching someone else. He searched the house, convinced Emily must have had documents or messages tying into the conspiracy. He found nothing, because there was nothing. No messages, no documents, no plot, nothing but two bodies, and a man losing his grip on reality. Daniel insisted he didn't run to escape justice. He ran because he was sure. Internal Affairs was framing him. The department wanted him silenced. Fletcher had betrayed him. The killings would be twisted against him. No one would believe his truth. When Bennett asked why he went into the woods instead of turning himself in, Daniel, you know what happens to cops in prison, especially ones accused of murder. He wasn't entirely wrong. But the deeper truth was simpler. He couldn't face what he had done. Psychologists reviewing the interrogation saw clear signs of post-traumatic stress, chronic hypervigilance, delusional projection, paranoia, dissociation, emotional collapse. One expert said, he didn't kill because he wanted to. He killed because, in his delusional state, he thought he was defending himself from a fabricated threat. Another expert had a harsher view. Delusions don't pull triggers. People do. In the final hour of the confession, Daniel looked straight into the camera. His voice broke. Daniel, I ruined everything. Their lives. My life. All because I couldn't see what was real and what wasn't. A long, painful silence followed. Then he whispered something that investigators never forgot. Daniel, I wasn't running from the police. I was running from myself. When the confession concluded, prosecutors assembled a devastating case. Daniel was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, breaking and entering, armed home invasion, fleeing law enforcement, obstruction of justice, weapon enhancement charges. He faced life in prison without parole. But the story still wasn't over, because Daniel's trial would become a battleground of psychology, morality, and the thin line between sickness and evil. And the victims' families would demand answers. Answers they believed the department owed them. Answers the community demanded to know. When a fugitive is captured, justice begins. But when that fugitive is a former police officer, trained, respected, once trusted, the justice system is forced to confront a more complicated truth. Not just what happened, but how a good man fell so far. What follows is the final chapter of the case that haunted Ridgewood. A chapter filled with grief, anger, and a courtroom that became a battlefield. Media frenzy. By the time Daniel's trial began on October 6th, the case had become national news. Headlines read, Former cop turned fugitive faces murder trial. Double homicide. How a police officer lost his mind. The Pine Hollow manhunt. Inside the collapse of Daniel Riker. Photographers swarmed the courthouse steps. Journalists camped outside for days. Protesters held signs demanding justice for Ryan and Emily. Inside, tension was suffocating. The prosecution painted Daniel as unstable, dangerous, obsessive, unwilling to accept responsibility. They described the murders as brutal, deliberate acts committed by a man who believed he was above the law. Key evidence presented. Ballistics confirmed Daniel's service weapon killed Ryan. Emily's autopsy showed signs of suffocation, defensive wounds. Daniel's fingerprints were found throughout the victim's home. Survival gear and maps indicated premeditation of escape, not sanity. Journal entries were read aloud, detailing paranoia, delusions, bitterness. The ranger station standoff footage was shown to the courtroom. But the most devastating testimony came from a single person, Captain Fletcher. Fletcher walked to the stand with the heavy step of a man carrying years of guilt. He described Daniel as one of the best officers I ever trained. Before everything went wrong. He recounted the night of the controversial shooting 3 years earlier, the internal affairs investigation, Daniel's growing paranoia, the department's attempts to help him, his refusal to take psychological leave. The courtroom was silent as Fletcher finished. Fletcher, I loved that kid like a son, but by the end, he wasn't the Daniel I knew. Daniel looked away, unable to meet Fletcher's eyes. Daniel's lawyers did not argue innocence. They argued insanity. They claimed Daniel was suffering from untreated PTSD, experiencing persecutory delusions, mentally broken after years of department pressure, incapable of distinguishing reality from paranoia, in a dissociative state during the killings. Mental health experts testify. One psychiatrist testified, Daniel was operating under a fixed delusion that the victims were part of a conspiracy. His actions were not grounded in reason. He believed he was in danger. Another added, this was a preventable tragedy. If Daniel had received proper intervention, this breakdown might have been avoided. But the prosecution fired back. He bought survival gear. He trained in wilderness evasion. He shot an unarmed man. Then he suffocated a woman. The question became, was Daniel a murderer who lost control, or a sick man who never should have been on the street? Ryan's father. He stood before the courtroom, hands trembling. Ryan's father. Ryan was my only child. He opened the door to help a stranger, and he died for it. I don't care why Daniel did it. I only care that my son is gone. His voice cracked. The courtroom wept. Emily's sister. Her testimony was sharp, furious, heartbreaking. Emily's sister. He didn't care about her life. He didn't see her as a person, just a threat to his delusions. She was planning her wedding. She had her whole life ahead of her. Then she turned to Daniel. Emily's sister. You stole her from us, and I hope you never forget it. Daniel cried openly for the first time. Against his attorney's advice, Daniel demanded to speak. He walked slowly to the stand, wrists trembling, voice hoarse. Daniel, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. He explained his mental decline, the investigations, the nightmares, the belief he was being followed, the fear he would lose his badge, the feeling of being hunted. He said, Daniel, I thought I was in danger, but I was wrong. I see that now. When asked if he intended to kill Ryan, Daniel, no, but I didn't stop myself either. When asked why he killed Emily, Daniel broke down. Daniel, I panicked. I thought she would expose everything. I wasn't thinking. I was terrified. His final statement was quiet, pained, and raw. Daniel, I wish I had died in those woods. It would have been easier for everyone. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Prosecution. The prosecutor pointed directly at Daniel. Prosecutor. Fear does not excuse murder. Delusion does not excuse suffocation. He killed 2 innocent people. He fled like a coward. And he put this entire community through hell. Defense. The defense attorney countered. Defense. Punish him if you must. But do not pretend he was in his right mind. This was a man drowning, and the department let him sink. The jury's decision had to answer a single question. Was Daniel criminally insane, or criminally responsible? After 19 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Everyone held their breath. The judge asked, How do you find the defendant? The foreman stood. His voice was steady. Guilty of first-degree murder on all counts. A collective gasp filled the room. Daniel closed his eyes. No emotion, no anger, just a quiet acceptance. He whispered 2 words. I understand. 1 month later, sentencing took place. The judge read from the bench. You were trusted with authority. You betrayed that trust. You took 2 innocent lives. And you terrorized this community. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 40 years for additional charges. He nodded slowly. As he was led away, he turned once, just once, toward Fletcher. Their eyes met. Fletcher mouthed, I'm sorry. Daniel mouthed back, Me too. Then he was gone. The department's reckoning. The Ridgewood Police Department conducted a full internal review. Findings revealed multiple ignored warning signs. Failure to refer Daniel to mandatory psychological evaluation. Insufficient monitoring after the controversial shooting. Lack of proper mental health resources. The chief resigned. Several supervisors were disciplined. New policies were implemented, too late for Daniel, Emily, or Ryan. The community, Ridgewood, changed forever. A memorial for Emily and Ryan was built outside the courthouse. People visited daily. Flowers, photos, candles. Fear lingered. Trust in police fractured. A resident said, If someone like Daniel could break, who else could? Fletcher. He retired early. He never recovered. In prison, Daniel attended therapy, took medication, wrote letters he never sent, read survival books he once lived by, avoided other inmates, spent most days in silence. One counselor reported, His greatest punishment wasn't the sentence. It was remembering what he did when he was sick. In a final evaluation, Daniel said, I don't fear dying here. I fear dying remembered only as a monster. Years later, people still talk about the Pine Hollow manhunt. Parents told their children never to wander the woods. Officers who once trained under Daniel retell the warning. Even the strongest can break. But perhaps the most haunting legacy was the lesson the department learned too late. Ignoring a broken mind can create a broken man. and a broken man can destroy lives.